Okay, so now we are going to have a discussion a bit on the MCP, which is a model context protocol. Now think MCP like more like a USB. We needed a specific protocol for these tools to get connected, which is like extending the capability of the LLM. Now in the previous video, we already saw about the tool calling. However, there was a limitations on the tool calling. So tool calling was a specific LLM feature which was specified by the OpenAI. It was not something which was pretty much standard one that we can, follow across. Plus, all these tools that you are basically listing down are kind of the static tool list that we have, right? Same way, it works on the app level, application level. And all of these execution which was basically happening was happening on the local. This is what the function call looked like. And finally, one of the major part was it never had any interoperability, which means you cannot reuse the component. So we needed something with cross agent. We needed something which is a distributed and works on a network layer, has very dynamic discovery altogether, right? And more than just a LLM feature, it needs to be an architecture, protocol. So tool calling was all about, what action do I need? However, we needed a much more robust. How do I access that action in a very standardized way? And that's exactly where, the MCP was born. So the idea of the MCP was to have these standardization in the first place. Now, what do we need and standardization in the first place? Just imagine that so far what we did is we specified some function, right? Get weather, right? Add number, right? Search logs, and you can keep on writing a specific function. And then all these functions were passed on to the model, and then this was basically working around. This basically created a lot of problem, which was hard coded. There was no discovery. It was tightly coupled, right? No cross agent reuse, no standard protocol, and every agent will basically become a custom built island, you can say. They don't scale in an enterprise system. So when it comes to enterprise, we needed something which is a bit more standard. We need something which is a bit more shared, right? Shared tools, tool ecosystem that we need. We needed to have something more dynamic. We needed to have something which is more like a plug and play, right? And all of these basically problems was basically solved by the MCP. So MCP in a nutshell is just a standardized protocol that allows AI agent to discover and use external tools and data sources in a structured way. So in short, tool calling is about decision. MCP is more like an infrastructure. You can think MCP like more like a USB Type C for USB-C for AI tools. So instead of manually wiring each tool into each agent, what MCP does it provides a standard interface, have a tool schemas, a discovery mechanism, an execution routing, and proper context management as well. Okay, so when it comes to the MCPs, and I took a pretty much example of these things as well. So it consists of like four major part. One is a obviously we start from a user. It starts from a host, right? Now hosts are more like something which is a brain. your LLM brain, you can say. Then we needed some specific client, and these clients are nothing. These clients are more like your you can say something like a thin communication layer which is sitting inside the agents, right? The servers are the actual working where it basically it basically works around, right? Where it basically exposes the tools, schemas, and everything. And then you have an external system. It can be anything. It can be AWS, it can be Jira, your databases, and everything. So how does it basically work, right? And then let's look into it. What are these, specifically, let's focus a bit more on the MCP servers. So just consider that, you have a Slack, right? You have a, Gmail, you have a, some notification features, some drives, some database and stuff, right? Now, in order to access them, all of them, because we have been so much wired with a SaaS product, creating a SaaS product, that everything basically works on an API way. So you do have an API for Slack. You will have some standardized multiple APIs for Slack, multiple APIs for Gmail. Take an example of a Gmail. You will have an API to send message. You'll have an API to read a message. You'll have an API to reply. You will have an API to delete. You will have an API to update. You will have an API for putting on spam stuff. So you have an API for every single thing. Now the idea is that when we, as a user, we normally we say, hey, can you do this specific task and send an email to this specific person? So that email has to, we send the information not in a standardized way, but we send the information in a very vague manner. Because when it comes to the API, they require a standard, input in a standard JSON format, right? But here we are not specifying in a standard JSON format. And that's exactly where the idea was, that we need a specific server which already communicates with this specific suite. So for example, there will be already a Gmail, probably an MCP server, which has kind of created a layer and is already communicating with this suite. So this basically server becomes a very standard way of communicating with this Gmail tool. So it has already, had implemented and talked with these, Gmail altogether, right? Now, as a client, right, all we just have to do is we just have to call this server. We don't have to worry about what are the APIs and everything which what the Gmail offers to. All we just have to do is use the MCP server address of the Gmail. And then, like a normal, prompting, we just ask them to do. Send an email to Prashant, right, about XYZ. And you send this information to this MCP server. MCP server takes the information. Then, obviously, it knows what, specific APIs to hit. It hits the API and get the task being done. So MCP at this part is basically a standardized way. So every time that anyone in the entire world, if they have to work around with the Gmail, right, or automate something with Gmail, they don't have to rewrite the entire code altogether. They can simply just call these MCP server for the Gmail and include them in their ecosystem altogether. So unlike the function calling where you have to keep on specifying it every single time, this becomes a much more standard way as well. So what about the life cycle, right? And before the life cycle, these clients, right? These clients are nothing. You have a cursor, you have a cloud, multiple things all around, right? These are the places where you basically include, your discussion around your specific discussion, right? You call them up and then you ask them a specific question and then they basically start acting towards it. What about now coming back to the life cycle, right? On the life cycle side, let's try to understand the life cycle a bit more, right? How does it work? So as an agent, we'll probably ask, right, what tools are available? So agent is basically going to ask what tools are available. And the MCP server is going to respond by, with tool schema, right? So MCP server responds with the schemas for the tools. Then agent, and in this way, when I'm saying agent, I'm more like the client side of it. So the agent basically, is going to select the appropriate tool. So agent here is more like an LLM, right? So agent is basically going to, select the tool, appropriate tool, and then it sends the MCP server to execute tool. Sorry, it asks the MCP client actually first to send the request. So MCP client is basically going to send the request, and MCP server is going to execute tool. It returns the result to back to the agent. Remember, agent is an LLM at this point. And then agent, you know, continues the reasoning. Right. Now, if you notice something here, the agent does not need to know the implementation detail here. It has no idea, hey, how these things are being implemented behind the scene and stuff like that. All it needs to know is what are the, the tools which are available to me, and just let me know about the tool. I'll just make a, informed decision about it. That's it. So that is what the MCP is. Let's try to look at, and this will basically clear out a lot of confusion around the MCPs with a specific example. So what I've done, I have a specific, MCP already, right? So here I'm gonna have McKinsey, ADV, and multiple MCPs have been installed, and it has this, function called as, where it's just, I'm basically using, these specifications with Uh, oh, okay, I don't know why. Okay, so just use my different editor. Yeah, okay, this works. So what I've done is like, I have went to the, cursor into the settings, and I have added these specific tools, right? And I'll, in the next video, we'll talk about how do we create these, MCP servers and, include this. We'll take this the same example as well with a different name. I basically included this, and this MCP server consists of nothing. It just consists of one add function, which is literally doing an addition of two numbers, and there's this function, unique function, which is basically doing some sort of calculations. So when if you look into the cursor, I have these functionality being there, right? So if you look this part like the cloud, this cursor, this is more like a client. So at this point, what happens is that when I say hi to this specific agent, it basically starts planning out the move, right? Which means it's basically I'm communicating with an agent. So LLM is there, it basically interacts with me. I said add two numbers 4 and 7. What happens at this point is when I say, hey, you have to add two number, right? Now, generally, when I specified, hey, do an addition because it's pretty much, simple one to do it, it basically went ahead and did an addition. However, I'll just say like, add 67 and, 85 using, I can say, read, right. So what it does is, first the information goes to the, agent at the LLM. It searches that, okay, fine, I have to do this addition, but using this, right? Which means I have to I already have an idea about this, something like this has been added to me. So what it does is it basically the LLM will basically ask the client that hey, and the client at this point is a cursor that hey, can you execute this on behalf of me, right? So client at this point is like a thin layer between an LLM and the server because this is like a Mackenzie ADV server. It makes a call to this specific server, right? And it says, hey, I'm just going to run this server. And you see, it basically executed this. It added and executed the addition functionality, right? So the information goes to the server. It does all the processes, returns the information back to the LLM. LLM basically fetches the information, modifies the result, right? And then, you know, it basically, gave you the answer, right? Anyway, so this is, you know, a simple idea, right, on how these, tool basically works now. Now, the next video, we'll be looking forward to a bit more detailed way of working around with these, MCP servers. We'll create some meaningful servers. I will try to do some, meaningful activities with this server. That being said, thanks a lot for watching this video. See you in the next video.